So I want you to imagine you're at a high school reunion, right? You walk in, you grab a drink, you're trying to mingle, but literally every single person you run into only wants to talk about this one school play you did when you were like 14.
Oh, that sounds like an actual nightmare.
Right. They're reciting your lines back to you. They're asking you to do the voice. They basically only see you as that one specific teenager,
Yeah.
no matter what you've actually done with your life since then.
Yeah, you're completely frozen in time to them.
Exactly. Now, take that awkwardness, multiply it by 1 billion, and imagine your face from that age is just plastered on lunch boxes and bed sheets and movie posters all over the entire globe. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Our mission today is to do a character study on an actor who faced that exact paralyzing scenario.
And, someone who managed to engineer one of the most brilliant psychological escapes in modern cinema?
Yeah, because for most people, having your entire professional identity cemented by a single iconic role before you even hit adulthood, I mean, that would be terrifying. Actively resisting those massive public expectations is a huge risk.
It's the ultimate trap of success, really. You get defined entirely by an image you outgrew before you even got your driver's license.
And you could just retire at 20, right? Buy an island, disappear forever. But Daniel Radcliffe chose the exact opposite route.
He really did. And, what connects his incredibly disparate post-franchise roles isn't just this desire to run away from his past. It's this deeply rooted, restless curiosity. Because that's what separates genuine range from just the illusion of versatility. The illusion is just putting on different hats, doing a funny accent. But genuine range means you're actively willing to find a very specific, deeply uncomfortable emotional truth in every single performance, no matter how bizarre the premise is.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the sheer variety of roles he's taken on since then is staggering. I mean, we're talking about the absolute furthest extremes of human and sometimes non-human experience.
Oh, definitely.
Like, he's played a grief-stricken widower in a haunted house, a decomposing corpse that gives life advice, a man who wakes up growing actual horns as a supernatural punishment, and an undercover federal agent infiltrating domestic extremism.
This is a wild resume.
It really is.
Yeah.
He didn't just genre hop for the sake of escapism. He used these deeply uncomfortable roles for, like, profound psychological exploration.
Yeah, he treats each role as a genuine interrogation of the human condition, moving from a world of highly controlled, family-friendly, global superstardom into these gritty, morally ambiguous indie spaces. It requires a total recalibration of the biological mechanics of acting.
Right.
You have to learn how to use your body and your voice in ways that a blockbuster franchise simply never asks you to do.
Well, let's actually start there with that baseline.
Yeah.
Because before we can get into the, decomposing corpses and obscure thrillers, we have to look at the constraints of that massive decade-long franchise. Harry Potter.
Foundation of it all.
Yeah, and the thematic challenge there is immense. How do you age a single character over 10 years, from a literal child to an adult, without just repeating the exact same emotional register over and over?
Well, that is the defining challenge of long-form narrative, right? In the early films, the character is just discovering this magical heritage. He's an abused orphan finding wonder and a place to belong.
Yeah.
And his performance in those first few installments is brilliantly appropriate because it's so small. He doesn't, perform amazing.
Oh, that's a good point. A lot of child actors will sort of flail their arms or gasp really dramatically to show you they're surprised.
Exactly. But he simply is amazed. He registers this massive new world entirely through wide eyes and this sort of stunned stillness.
Which is so real. If a kid actually saw magic for the first time, they wouldn't know how to theatrically react. They'd just freeze. Their brain just wouldn't process it.
Totally. But then, we hit the middle years of the franchise and the tone shifts dramatically.
Oh, yeah. By Prisoner of Azkaban, the wonder is suddenly complicated by the knowledge that this hidden world isn't purely good.
Right, the stakes get higher.
And then by Goblet of Fire, he's forced into this deadly tournament against his will, and you start to see this withdrawn, wounded anger simmering. And then, boom, Order of the Phoenix hits, and it's just pure, unfiltered teenage fury.
That teenage fury phase is such a fascinating study in acting mechanics. It's explosive, it's unfocused, and he directs it at authority figures and his friends alike. What he's doing physically there, he's tensing his jaw, he's sharpening his vocal delivery, creating this actual physical barrier between himself and the other actors. He's capturing the psychology of someone dealing with severe trauma while, simultaneously being gaslit by society about that trauma even existing.
But wait, I have to push back here for a second.
Sure.
Wasn't he somewhat constrained by the source material? Like, how much of this emotional evolution is actually his acting choices versus him just hitting the plot points laid out in the books?
Yeah.
Because the books literally dictate that the character is angry in year 5.
It's a totally fair question. But the acting choices are found in the physical subtleties that a book can really only describe in text. The actor has to actually embody them.
Okay, yeah.
Like, look at the final years of the franchise. The character is on the run, essentially homeless, starving, and he's carrying this magical object that is psychologically torturing him.
Right, the Horcrux.
Exactly. The plot just says he's tired.
Mm-hmm.
But he plays this physical and mental deterioration by entirely changing his center of gravity. His movements become incredibly careful, almost labored, like every single step costs him energy.
Wow, yeah.
His voice drops into this hoarse register from disuse. His emotional capacity visibly shrinks. He understood that his job wasn't to make the character likable or iconic anymore. His job was to make the character real.
He's documenting the true psychological cost of being thrust into circumstances far beyond human capacity. And it all culminates in this heartbreakingly accepting peace as he walks toward his own end in the final film.
Yes.
His posture finally relaxes, but not in a victorious way. It's in a way that says he's finally putting down a burden he's been carrying for a decade.
Which raises an important question. Once you've spent your formative years mastering the portrayal of external magical threats, what do you even do next?
You completely strip away the armor of the blockbuster hero. If the franchise was all about fighting external monsters, his next move was to explore these intense internal psychological breakdowns. He dives into the absolute horror of the unknown versus like the visceral awakening of passion.
Which brings us to a really fascinating contrast in his early post-franchise work. I'm talking about The Woman in Black and Kill Your Darlings.
Yes, let's get into those.
So, in The Woman in Black, he plays Arthur Kipps. He's this young solicitor sent to an isolated, foggy village to catalog the estate of deceased woman. He's dealing with a vengeful spirit, obviously, but the core of the performance isn't just about running away from a ghost.
Right, it's deeper than that.
It's about how a grieving, completely rational man tries to hold his fracturing mind together with pure logic.
And for those of you listening, think about how you handle extreme stress, right? When work is chaotic or your personal life feels out of control, do you ever find yourself hyper-fixating on a to-do list? Or like color-coding a spreadsheet?
Oh, absolutely.
It's an attempt to impose order on chaos. And that is exactly what Arthur Kipps is doing. He's trying to stop a catastrophic flood with an Excel spreadsheet. He uses extreme professionalism cataloging papers, keeping a stiff posture as his literal armor against fear.
What's fascinating here is how he physically manifests that internal state failing. He starts the film very deliberate, keeping this emotional and physical distance. But as the supernatural reality actually sets in, we witness the terrifying failure of those logical frameworks.
It's so unsettling to watch.
It really is. He shows this armor cracking incrementally. He doesn't just scream. His movements become jittery. They become reactive. You start to hear his breathing become audible and ragged in quiet rooms.
Yeah.
He's showing us that the real terror isn't the ghost itself. It's the realization that logic absolutely does not apply to his situation. The spreadsheet cannot stop the water.
And the tension comes entirely from that restraint. Because watching someone try so hard not to lose their mind is infinitely scarier than watching someone just freely panic.
Exactly.
But once you've explored a character who's tightly bound by logic, the natural evolution is to figure out how to play a character liberated by emotion, which perfectly sets up his role as the poet Allen Ginsberg in Kill Your Darlings.
Oh, what a pivot. This is a character just bursting at the seams with new ideas. Early in the film, he's a young gay man in the 1940s at Columbia University, and he imbues Ginsberg with this intense nervous energy.
You can really see it in his body language.
Yes. You see the social uncertainty in how he holds his shoulders, how he hesitates before he speaks. He knows his intellect is valued by the university, but his identity is deeply dangerous.
But then he meets Lucien Carr, who introduces him to this underground bohemian world, and that caution just explodes. And what I love about this performance is that he ensures Ginsberg's intellectual development is completely inseparable from his emotional development.
Yes, they're tied together.
When he encounters a new style of poetry or a radical new idea, he doesn't play it as some dry, abstract academic exercise.
No, he plays it with bold, intoxicated enthusiasm. There's this actual physiological shift in the performance. His voice rises in pitch, his gestures become expansive and sweeping. You're watching the physical release of a person who finally has permission to express his way of thinking and feeling openly. He stops holding his breath, metaphorically and literally.
But, if you master how to express intellectual and romantic passion, what happens when that passion isn't allowed to escape? Or worse, what happens when your deepest desires manifest in a way you can't control?
That's the dark side of it.
Exactly. Which brings us to a crucial thematic turning point in his career, navigating the tension between the corruption of power and the ache of restraint.
This duality is perhaps the most vital part of his psychological exploration. We see it play out so vividly in the dark fantasy thriller Horns.
Oh, man, Horns.
He plays Ig Parrish, this young man grieving his murdered girlfriend, who happens to also be the prime suspect in her death. And he wakes up one morning and is literally growing horns out of his forehead.
Such a wild premise.
Completely. And these horns grant him the supernatural ability to compel people to confess their darkest secrets and just give in to their worst impulses.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the performance captures the incredibly addictive quality of power. At first, Ig is devastated, right? He's withdrawn, he's trapped by the town's accusations, he's very much a victim. But when he realizes what this power can actually do, he introduces this dark exhilaration into the character. He can force the world, which has been so cruel to him, to acknowledge his reality and do his bidding.
And the brilliance of his acting here is the sheer moral ambiguity. Like, how does an actor play the act of becoming comfortable with cruelty?
Yeah, how do you show that?
He does it by subtly changing his physical interactions. Instead of backing away from conflict, he starts leaning in. He replaces grimaces of pain with these slight, disturbing smirks.
Oh, that's so true.
You're watching him use this power, and you're constantly forced to ask, is he seeking righteous justice for his girlfriend, or is he just reveling in revenge and dominance?
Right. He makes the character simultaneously sympathetic and completely repellent.
Yeah.
You understand why he's doing it, but you're horrified by how much he's enjoying it. Now, contrast that intoxicating power with a character who has zero power over his situation. On the exact opposite end of the spectrum of unmet desire, you have his role as Wallace in the romantic comedy What If?
Wallace. He's a medical school dropout who has completely retreated from life after a terrible infidelity in his last relationship.
Yeah, he's just checked out.
And he protects himself with this thick layer of cynical, wary millennial humor.
Which is another defense mechanism I think a lot of us can relate to, honestly. If you beat everyone else to the punchline, they can't hurt you. If you treat everything ironically, you never have to admit that you actually care.
Exactly.
Wallace uses deadpan comedy as a deflection to maintain distance from genuine feeling. Kind of like how Arthur Kipps used professionalism in The Woman in Black.
He's learned that opening up leads to pain. But then, he meets Chantry at a party. They have this immediate, undeniable connection, but she is in a long-term relationship.
Right.
The walls he built don't magically disappear, but they become highly permeable.
And this is where the contrast with Horns is so striking. Ig is corrupted by the power he wields, but Wallace is completely paralyzed by the power of his own unexpressed feelings.
Yes.
He has to balance the reality of intense romantic desire coexisting with principled restraint. He has to respect her relationship so he contains his passion.
And to physically act out that kind of restraint is incredibly demanding. He can't use grand gestures. He chooses the genuine ache of unresolved longing through these micro-hesitations.
Like what?
Like the way he almost reaches out to touch her arm but pulls his hand back, or the way his sarcastic smile just fades the second she looks away. He does it without ever relying on ironic distance or melodramatic devastation. It's just quiet, persistent, deeply relatable emotional pain.
So he's mastered moral ambiguity, and he's mastered quiet emotional vulnerability.
Yeah.
But the ultimate test of his range, the roles that seem to demand the absolute most from him physically and mentally, are when his characters are weaponized against their will.
Oh, this is the deepest end of the pool.
We're talking about characters forced into extreme environments that violate their fundamental nature.
This is where we see the deepest psychological toll in his performances. He takes characters who have a strong sense of self, And he forces them into situations that systematically dismantle that identity.
Yeah?
We see this brilliantly executed in the forced integration of Imperium and the forced violence of Guns Akimbo.
Okay, let's talk about Imperium. He plays Nate Foster, who's this earnest, highly idealistic FBI agent who volunteers to go undercover to infiltrate white supremacist and anti-government extremist groups.
Right.
And, just to be super clear for everyone listening, we are strictly looking at the narrative and acting mechanics of the plot here. We're not endorsing any political viewpoints or anything like that. The dramatic engine of this film is just that Nate has to embed himself in these communities to prevent domestic terrorism.
Exactly. It's about the survival aspect. To survive, he has to convincingly adopt and parrot beliefs that he absolutely despises. The mental toll of that forced integration is staggering. Think about the biomechanics of lying, especially when your life is on the line. He has to participate in conversations that are morally repellent to him while pretending to be someone who enthusiastically agrees.
I actually have to ask you about the mechanics of that.
Yeah.
Because it takes a massive toll to play a character who is, themselves, playing a character. How does an actor physically show the audience that their internal idealism is cracking under the pressure without giving the secret away to the other characters in the room?
It is all in the micro expressions and the tension held in the body. He communicates this incredible strain through really careful vocal control.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, when Nate is agreeing with the extremists, his voice is steady, but his eyes are deadened. You can literally see the sheer amount of effort it takes to suppress his natural biological stress response, the urge to fight or flee.
Right, because his body knows he's in danger.
Exactly. He forces his shoulders to relax when every instinct is telling him to tense up, but the true psychological tension comes from this growing, terrifying realization. He begins to see how ideology itself can be dangerously seductive to vulnerable people.
His absolute confidence in his own moral judgment wavers. Not because he agrees with the hate, but because the psychological weight of living in that echo chamber is just crushing his sense of reality. It's a brilliant portrayal of a mind under siege.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, A Mind Under Siege perfectly transitions us to Guns Akimbo, where the siege is entirely physical.
Talk about a pivot.
Right. He plays Miles Harris, a deeply nonviolent, fairly pathetic video game developer. He gets kidnapped by this underground organization that literally bolts handguns to his hands.
It's so absurd.
And they force him to participate in a live-streamed, citywide deathmatch.
It is such a hyperkinetic, neon-soaked premise. It's essentially a live-action cartoon, but what grounds it and makes it actually watchable is his performance. The film uses exaggerated, over-the-top violence to create this grotesque, game-like distance. And that visual style perfectly mirrors Miles' sheer disorientation and horror at his own weaponization.
He is physically capable of extreme violence now. I mean, his hands are literally weapons, but he actively, desperately resists it. It creates a fascinating parallel with his role in Horns.
Oh, how so?
Well, both Ig and Miles are weaponized. But where Ig became corrupted by a dark power he actively sought to use, Miles is forced into a violent capacity he completely rejects.
The physical comedy of having hands you can't use, like he can't put on pants, he can't open a door. It's played for laughs, sure.
Yeah.
But he profoundly understands the psychological difference between choosing darkness and having darkness imposed upon you.
Yes.
He plays Miles with a default response of retreat and this nervous, terrified humor.
Yeah.
Even in the middle of a brutal combat sequence, his vocal delivery remains high-pitched, reluctant, uncertain. He never turns into a cool action hero. He stays terrified the entire time.
Exactly. Even in a film that is fundamentally an absurd action comedy, he treats the role with the exact same level of psychological interrogation as he does a serious historical drama like Kill Your Darlings. He is always looking for the truth of the situation, no matter how ridiculous the premise is. He is never coasting.
So what does this all mean? When we look at this entire journey, from the boy wizard carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders, to the undercover agent suffocating under a false identity, to the guy running around in his bathrobe with guns bolted to his hands, this filmography is a profound testament to genuine artistry.
It really is.
Instead of coasting on nostalgia, he actively pursued roles that demanded completely new biological and psychological skills. Physical comedy, historical specificity, absolute moral ambiguity, deep emotional restraint.
It's a vital reminder for you listening right now. Resting on your past successes, staying in the lane that people expect of you is incredibly comfortable. The world rewards you for being predictable. But true growth, the genuine discovery of what you are actually capable of, only happens when you force yourself into unfamiliar, deeply uncomfortable territory. He had to risk looking foolish, risk alienating his original fan base to discover his true range as an artist.
We all play roles in our daily lives, don't we? The reliable friend, the efficient corporate worker, the peacekeeper in the family drama. We get typecast in our own realities, often by our own doing.
Mm-hmm.
Think back to that high school reunion we talked about at the beginning. It's easy to be frozen in time by other people's expectations, but it's even easier to freeze yourself. If someone stripped away the franchise role of your own life tomorrow, if you suddenly couldn't be the person everyone expects you to be, would you have the restless curiosity to figure out who else you are capable of being?
That's the real question.
What hidden passions or unexpected strengths are you suppressing just to keep the spreadsheet balanced? Because stepping out of your own shadow and interrogating who you really are, well, that might be the most magical thing you could possibly do.